We're fortunate to have Barbara Nagy with us again. Barbara talked to us a little over 2 years ago about Mary Stillman Harkness. Barbara is a communication and marketing consultant and a freelance historian with a lifelong interest in history. She was the site administrator at the Hampstead House in New London for 3 seasons and is on the boards of the Avery Copp House Museum in Groton and the Groton Public Library. Barbara's been involved in many local history projects over the years, including the reinterpretation of the Hampstead houses in 2017, an oral history of electric boat in the 1960s that was funded with a Connecticut Humanities Grant in 2014, and the centennial celebration at Connecticut College in 2011. She got her start as a reporter for many years at several newspapers, including the New London Day and the Hartford Courant. Her marketing career began at Conn College. And Richard Gipstein. He's been an avid photographer since he was a teenager and has maintained his own home darkroom for many years. He's a graduate of Harvard College, earned a master's degree from Harvard Graduate School of Design in 1975. In 1977, he joined the architectural firm of Lindsay, Liebig, and Roach, where he worked for 30 years, eventually becoming the principal. He's been involved in many historic restoration projects for the New London Redevelopment Agency over the years, including the renovation of over 60 building facades on Bank Street and the Lower State Street in the late 70s and early 80s. And with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for being here. I have to say it's great to see some familiar faces. There's this beautiful old school in my neighborhood. 2 stories, classic red brick, big windows. The Groton Heights School opened in 1913 and has been closed since 2008. 6 years ago, when it seemed like the school was deteriorating very quickly, I discovered that the architect was someone I had never heard of before, Dudley St. Clair Donnelly. Google and newspaper archive searches kept turning up articles and contract awards, big and small, plus some personal items. Donnelly swimming in Long Island Sound in January, hunting with Morton Plant, and traveling to places like Cuba. Pretty soon I had a list of more than 75 buildings that he had designed, renovated, or built additions for, and it's still growing. Donnelly's projects locally included well over 50 major commercial buildings, schools, churches, and houses built from the 1890s into the 1920s. His local work is concentrated in downtown New London, the Eastern Point and Groton Heights neighborhoods of Groton, and the residential area south of the hospital in New London. His buildings can also be found in many other places, including the Elm Grove Cemetery in Mystic. He designed the superintendent's house there in 1905. I discovered that Donnelly had significant commissions in Florida and New Jersey, too. He was the architect for some of Coral Gables' first buildings, working with landmark developer George Merrick in the 1920s. I felt like I had hit the lottery. Then I started to wonder who this guy was. How could he have built all these landmark buildings? When did he come to New London, and why? How did he connect with Morton Plant? Well, we'll start at the beginning and see if we can find some answers. Donnelly was born in 1870 in Barbados and emigrated to Yonkers with his parents when he was 5 years old. Their ancestors were Irish. Donnelly's father was the treasurer of Lawrence Brothers, a major contractor supply company in Yonkers. That's probably how Dudley, his friends actually called him Dud, developed his passion for architecture. He got his start as a draftsman for architects in Yonkers and Boston. In 1892, he came to New London with one of those firms, Cole and Chandler, which was designing the Winthrop School. When George Warner Cole died suddenly in 1893 from typhoid fever, Donnelly finished the project under the supervision of James Sweeney. Sweeney had taken over the office after Cole's death. He went on to design the New London City Hall, along with several other significant buildings on that side of the river. Donnelly was 23 years old when he wrapped up work on the Winthrop School. He decided to stay in New London, possibly, or maybe probably, because he had just married a local girl, Johanna Hurley, daughter of a police officer, Thomas Hurley. By 1899, Donnelly was partners with Louis R. Hazeltine. Until then, Donnelly had worked mainly on houses. He was known for his artistic sensibilities and his attention to detail. Hazeltine was 13 years older than Donnelly and had a background in civil engineering, so they made a good pair. Working together, they quickly won commissions for a large number of churches, commercial buildings, and schools. The partnership only lasted about 7 years, though. The two went their separate ways in December 1906. Hazeltine moved to the West Coast, and Donnelly struck off on his own. Donnelly's reputation locally continued to grow, and he rose rapidly in prominence. He soon was working on major buildings for Morton Plant and others. Donnelly was an accomplished draftsman and clearly loved that work. Some of his drawings include meticulous detail not just for facades, but for all types of interior decoration: window ornamentation, fireplace mantels, light fixtures, flooring patterns, even dining room cupboards. Donnelly was known for using the latest building systems and construction methods. He designed the first reinforced concrete structure in Southeastern Connecticut, for example. That's the Day Building in 1907. His plans for a receiving building at the Connecticut State Farm for Women incorporated new thinking on prison reform. That's now the prison in Niantic. He installed the latest plumbing and electrical systems in his top-end houses, and he took pains to ensure that his buildings fit into the existing streetscape. Donnelly took great pride in his work, too. He joined professional organizations in both Connecticut and Florida and was elected to the American Institute of Architects in 1921. He was extraordinarily adaptable to the wishes of his clients, the trends of the times, and the needs of his clients. He mastered a variety of styles, as you'll see in Rick's slides. If a client wanted the biggest and the best, Donnelly could provide it. If austerity was the watchword, that was fine too. Frederick Bill, who gave Groton, the Groton Heights School, wanted the best: a beautiful building, large airy classrooms, an efficient heating system, decorative touches. The school was hugely over budget at $75,000 in 1913, but Mr. Bill was not fazed. However, when the town of Groton wanted a school for Pequannock Bridge, the taxpayers were footing the bill. Donnelly came up with a simple but elegant design that was built for $16,000. Today, the building houses the town's social services department on Pequannock Road. Speaking of extravagance, both Donnelly and Morton Plant had larger-than-life personalities. Plant had money and enjoyed spending it and giving it away. He developed the luxurious Griswold Hotel in the Eastern Point section of Groton, built the opulent Branford House at his gentleman's farm at Avery Point, and owned the local baseball team, which of course was called the Planters. Donnelly was an amateur baseball player for years himself and a frequent umpire at local games. Both men also enjoyed big game hunting, horse racing, and golf. Like Plant, Donnelly was a lavish entertainment and loved travel and adventure. Their connection was a natural, I think. Donnelly designed 9 buildings for Plant that we know of, including extensive additions to the Griswold Hotel, renovations to Plant's Bel Air Hotel and Golf Course in Florida, a hunting lodge in East Lyme, 2 significant commercial buildings in downtown New London, the clubhouse at the Shenecosset Golf Course, now Par 4, and a 100,000 bungalow in Groton. Plant and his wife lived there much of the time when they were in town. They felt the Branford House was just too big for them. Donnelly probably also designed a 7,000 square foot residence on Shore Avenue in Groton, where Plant and his wife reportedly lived when the Branford House was being built. That's according to the National Register nomination for the Eastern Point Historic District. Donnelly's reputation and his ambitious drive for plum commissions won him plenty of contracts, but connections like Plant undoubtedly helped. Plant surely was the link to Donnelly's first Florida projects, for example, and it's probably no coincidence that Donnelly designed 4 buildings at Connecticut College, where Plant was the chair of the Board of Trustees. In the same way, Donnelly designed the headquarters for the New London Ship and Engine Company in Groton, later Electric Boat, and also designed houses for several of the top managers. They included Frank Cable, who piloted the Navy's first modern submarine, the Holland, during its sea trials. Likewise, Donnelly's connection to Mr. Bill helped him earn commissions for the Groton Congregational Church and the Groton Heights School. And in the same vein, Donnelly designed a building in New London for Daniel Marsh and then did work in Florida with him. Donnelly plunged into the Florida market in 1919. He was there for the initial construction boom, and he rode it well, but it didn't last. Merrick left Coral Gables in 1928, deeply in debt. Developers ran out of money, and commissions dried up with the crash of 1929. But Donnelly persevered. He worked as the building inspector in Coral Gables for a time and helped the city respond to the collapsing construction market. When Donnelly had to be laid off because the city couldn't afford his salary anymore, officials took pains to say publicly that he had performed to top standards. With that, Donnelly returned to New London, buying a small house on Lincoln Avenue and finding work where he could. When the city building inspector went on leave, Donnelly filled in. After that job ended, he was hired by the Works Progress Administration, probably as an architect with the historic American Building Survey. According to his obituary, he was assigned to the sub-base when he died. Donnelly was well known and also, apparently, well liked. The Norwich Bulletin described him in 1921 as the only genial architect in New London. And when he died, the Day wrote, "He was gifted with a generous and open personality. It was natural that he should make a vast number of friends." Still, there are clues that he was hard to work with. Sweeney, the City Hall architect, was probably a rival. They knew each other, but apparently only worked together once after being colleagues at Cole and Chandler. That project was a New London police station on Bradley Street, which is now the alley behind the Day building. The police station is long gone. Donnelly had no formal training as an architect, while Sweeney did have some education in the field. That may have been some of the source of friction. And Hazeltine, he might have felt overshadowed by Donnelly's high-flying persona, especially with someone as young as Donnelly at the time, and decided New London had little to offer him. There's also some evidence of friction within the Donnelly family. Donnelly is buried in an unmarked grave at Cedar Grove Cemetery in New London, and we don't honestly know why. His wife Johanna appears to be buried in the Hartford area. Death came to Donnelly on March 5th, 1937. He was working on the furnace in his basement and had a massive stroke, according to his death certificate. His wife found him unconscious. Donnelly was just 66. His career had spanned 45 years. Today, his legacy is all around us. Some of Donnelly's buildings have been demolished, but most remain standing. The Tyler House at Eastern Point Beach in Groton and the Bill Memorial Library are beauties. The Duart Building in New London is stunning. The Man-Waring Building on State Street was just renovated to house Conn College students. The Day Building is being redeveloped, and the New England Savings Bank also, into apartments and commercial buildings, I think. But the Mercer building, adjacent to the Gard Arts Center, was proposed for demolition a couple years ago, and the Groton Heights School in my neighborhood is still vacant and getting moldier by the day. It's a solid, handsome building with a wonderful history. The town will soon be requesting proposals for its redevelopment. It looks like they will require that the building be retained if feasible. It's one of the last and best remaining examples of Donnelly's school designs. I still have hope that it will be rescued. Thank you. And pleased now to turn the program over to Rick and Myra.
What Barbara was referring to is, can you hear me?
Yep.
My voice, I'm having voice problems. They're getting worse by the month. So I'm gonna let Myra speak for me. I've developed most of the slides here, and she will speak for me, and I will be glad to answer questions after she's gone through the slides.
Yeah. They're all your words. I'm going to be presenting from here, so I won't be insulted if some of you want to move away, because can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, so if it may be too loud right here. Okay. These are all, I'm just reading what Rick, his words, okay. Okay. Oh, and before we get started, Rick would like to acknowledge the tremendous amount of research that Barb has done on Donnelly. So thank you, Barb. Here's a photo of Donnelly as a young man. And here's a caricature of him that appeared in the New London Day. Barb, I think you mentioned him swimming in you can see him swimming in the Sound there. I guess he was known for that.
The thermometer shows 0 degrees.
0 degrees, yeah. Here's Donnelly, let's see, circled in red, with his dauntless high school baseball team in 1886. Donnelly was thought by some to be good enough to have played professionally. This shows an architect's office around 1900. Note the absence of computers. They are actually hand drawing the plans. This is an example of a beautiful working drawing. It's the Beckwith Chapel at the Cedar Grove Cemetery, drawn in ink on coated linen with very fine detail. Except for a little staining, these drawings are in excellent condition after more than a century, or after about a century. Through the years, architects have often relied on a patronage system. And here's an example. Morton Plant, one of Donnelly's clients, was a wealthy businessman who was involved with developing the railroads on the west coast of Florida. Here he is with his baseball team, the Planters. Donnelly and Plant forged a bond through their mutual love of baseball that went beyond the typical client-architect relationship. I'm going to say just a few words about Rick's connections with Dudley St. Clair Donnelly. Rick went to work for Lindsay Liebig Roach Architects in 1977. Lindsay Liebig Roach originated with Donnelly as the first principal architect and evolved through a series of partnerships until its last phase when Rick became the principal architect. Okay, excuse me. They had literally hundreds of his drawings in their vault. After relocating from New London to Waterford in the 1950s until the late 90s, Lindsay Liebig Roche moved their office back to New London, to the Dewart building, which had been designed by Donnelly, and where he had an office. He had an office. Another interesting coincidence. Rick's father was a cardiologist in New London for many years, and Donnelly was one of his patients. When Rick closed the firm 10 years ago, Donnelly's safe ended up in our garage. Unfortunately, it contained nothing of value. I'm just gonna, okay. This presentation is limited to buildings in southeastern Connecticut, including New London, Groton, and Waterford, where Donnelly did most of his work. It excludes the buildings he designed for Morton Plant in western Florida, where Plant was developing new railroad lines. The buildings we're presenting are separated into commercial and residential categories and are also presented in rough chronological order as accurately as possible. The 17 buildings shown in blue here are the commercial structures still standing that he designed in downtown New London. Here's the Masonic Lodge on the corner of Star and Green Street in New London. It has a cornerstone. Let's see if I can get that here. Just a minute. Here we go. It has a cornerstone bearing the Latin letters AL and the date 5886. AL Anno Lucis, in the year of light, is a dating system used in Masonic ceremonial or commemorative proceedings, which is equivalent to the Gregorian year plus 4,000. For example, a date Anno Domini AD 2024 becomes Anno Lucis 6024, according to the Masonic system. This is the Colonel Tyler residence on the corner of Gardiner and Pequot Avenue in New London. This residence was converted to the Home Memorial Hospital in 1920. Sadly, someone here was born there? Okay, so look at that. And so it was converted to the Home Memorial Hospital in 1920. Sadly, it burned down in 1944. Oh, this is just another view of it. You can see Gardiner Avenue there. Okay. Here's the Saltonstall School on Truman Street in New London, built in 1903. Some of you may know it as OIC. Donnelly designed the Saltonstall School in partnership with Louis Hazeltine. It's the current home of the OIC Opportunities Industrial Center. This building is in the Second Renaissance Revival style, a popular 19th century style that continued through about 1930. This is the Groton Congregational Church on Monument Street in the city of Groton. This rustic church building has 5 stained glass windows, one of which was designed and assembled at Tiffany Studios in New York. Rick wasn't sure what to call this style. He decided Fieldstone Gothic would work. Okay. Here's a detail from the church. It's unclear whether this is a gargoyle or a chimera. A gargoyle is used as a water spout. I think that's what it is, but if no water is conducted, it's called a chimera. The four on this church look to Rick like pigs with English barrister wigs. Okay. Donnelly redesigned the original facade of the Savings Bank of New London in 1896. The beautiful result features an ornate classical facade with Ionic columns and pilasters, dentils, balustrades, and swags. The new facade is made, or the facade is made of Milford pink granite from Milford, Mass. And the facade, as you can see, is slightly curved to conform to the street. Donnelly designed the original facade of the Savings Bank of New... Oh, we did that one. Okay. Here's a beautiful rendering of the former Mariners Savings Bank on State Street. You cannot see this today because it's covered up. It's not there anymore. The State Street facade has since been removed and replaced with modern storefronts, and the side facade is hidden by later structures. This is it today. This is the renovated street facade of the bank, where cheap materials have replaced the beautiful stonework. The Day Building is arguably Donnelly's most modern building in downtown New London, with its minimal decorations. The embossed metal spandrel panels echo the swag decorations on the adjacent bank facade. Donnelly designed a large annex to the Griswold Hotel in Groton in 1909. This grand hotel was demolished in the 1960s. This was originally Olev Shalom Synagogue, which translates as peace be upon them. This is a good example of classical revival and colonial revival styles applied to traditional synagogue architecture. It was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1995. In 1974, it was sold, the Star of David was removed, and it became Centro de la Comunidad. Donnelly designed this utilitarian building around 1909 for the New London Ship and Engine Company, located in Groton. Donnelly designed the Groton Heights School, which is now abandoned. Note the corner quoins, copper dentils, and classical columns that grace the facade. Oh, I was supposed to be showing you. So there are the quoins, the dentils up there, and the classical columns. A nice, understated, symmetrical design. You can see from these two photos from the years 1915 and 2022 that the Man-Waring building in New London is substantially unchanged, except for the ground floor storefronts. It is now being used as a dormitory for college students. And it's right next door to the church that just fell down. Donnelly designed the Shinnecock Golf Course Clubhouse in the city of Groton, 1913. And here it is today. A prominent building on State Street in New London, the Dewart Building was one of Donnelly's larger commissions from Mortimer Plant, after whom the building was originally named. Okay, so this is where Lindsay Lee Big Roach moved. Was it in the 90s, Rick?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the 90s. That's where they ended up. That's not his office. Plant's office was someplace else in the building. Okay. So the State Street facade of the Duart building features glazed polychrome terracotta, ionic pilasters, ionic capital pilasters, cartouches, and other floreate designs. Note the classical egg and dart motif. Let's see, that's these. And also there, I believe. Oh, here. There's the egg and dart. That's a classical motif. And here. Okay. The State Street facade of the Duart. Okay, there, we did that. Sorry. The Monte Cristo garage on Washington Street in New London was built on property owned by actor James O'Neill, father of Eugene O'Neill. James famously played the role of the Count of Monte Cristo on the stage. Financed by Morton Plant, this garage housed an automobile showroom and parking space. The building was known as the Garage Deluxe of America, with 60,000 square feet and the capacity to house 268 automobiles. The garage even once had an interior car elevator. So pretty modern. Donnelly designed the former YMCA building on the corner of Governor Winthrop Drive and Meridian Street in New London, which is now the Isaac School. The Meridian Street and Governor Winthrop Street facades are basically unchanged from their original design. The Marsh Building on State Street in New London is a handsome commercial building with an elegant facade. The storefront level has been tastefully remodeled. Winthrop House on the Conn College campus served as a student residence hall for much of its existence, until the North Complex was completed in the 1960s. Donnelly designed it in a colonial revival style, far different from the collegiate Gothic style of the other early campus buildings. Here it is today, just from a different angle. Here's a handsome apartment house on Washington Street in New London, designed in the early 1920s. And this was the Waller School in New London. It was one of Donnelly's last commissions and arguably his most modern in appearance. The exterior is mostly stucco as opposed to brick. The building has been in the process of renovation into a private residence for a very long time. I don't know what's happening with it now. Here's the Mercer Building on the corner of State and Meridian Streets in New London. Okay, so note the, oh wait, I think we have a close-up. There's a Mercer M cartouche. Where is it? Right there. The building was purchased by the Gard Art Center in 1993. The Beckwith Chapel at Cedar Grove Cemetery in New London is one of Donnelly's later buildings. Note the eyebrow dormers there, typically used to light attic spaces, and the decorative wrought iron hinges. Very special on the doors. Interesting. It's not moving. Why? You're doing it a different way. Okay, so that was the commercial buildings. Here are the private residences. This early shingle-style house in New London was designed for William Holt. Note the shingle siding over the entire surface of the exterior with contrasting stone. The asymmetry creates an informality. Also note the varied windows and doors. This is the Hobson residence on Ocean Avenue in New London, another shingle-style building. Many of you know this building. Currently the home, it's the Spicer House, currently the home of Groton Parks and Rec in Noank. It's a classic shingle-style building. Note the Palladian window, which is an arched window flanked by double-hung windows. Oh, this is where we go to the dentist. This was the parsonage for the Second Congregational Church on Broad Street in New London. Currently, it's the office of the Thames River Dental Group. I like that. Here's one of the several houses in New London that Donnelly designed, owned, and lived in. Okay, we all know this. The Tyler House at Eastern Point Beach in the city of Groton is shingle style and designed by Donnelly along with Hazeltine. It was sold in 1948 to William Ronick, who was president of the Lighthouse Inn Corp., and then purchased by the city of Groton in 1965. Just some more views of it. It's so beautiful. The Shipman residence on Hempstead Street in New London is a lovely, well-maintained lawyer's office today. It has a Jacobean revival feel with its symmetrical bays, curved flared gables, stucco walls, and generally stately vibe. This is the superintendent's residence at the Elm Grove Cemetery in Mystic. Okay. The Wilson residence in Waterford is Rick's favorite Donnelly house. This informal shingle-style house has a skillful mixture of stone and shingle. Here's the reverse view of the same house. The water side. Note the interesting semicircular balcony echoing the arch. Also see how much this side of the house with its circular sitting room differs from the other side, taking full advantage of the view of the Niantic River. Here's the living room in that house. Note the long window seat and another feature maximizing the view of the river. The Branford House was not designed by Donnelly, but by Robert Williams Gibson as Morton Plant's summer residence, which he used for about 6 weeks each summer. Plant commissioned Donnelly to design a bungalow for him to live in while the Branford House was being constructed. Some of you may recognize this in the city of Groton. Here's the bungalow built for Plant to live in while Branford House was being constructed. Just a cozy summer getaway. Note the octagonal room at the left-hand side of the porch, which has a magnificent view of the Thames River and Fisher's Island Sound. Here's the main entrance on the other side, street side. And this is the floor plan for the first floor of Plant's bungalow. This drawing is typical of what was shown to the client. There's that octagonal room you could see on the water side. Sun porch, okay. This is the interior. Okay. Oh, this is in East Lyme. It was Plant's hunting lodge. Both he and his stepson Philip were avid big game hunters. Philip donated a diorama of African wildlife to the Museum of Natural History in New York City, which we just saw recently. It's still there. This hunting lodge, built in 1908, is on the National Register of Historic Places. And I believe next we have a picture of the diorama that you could see there at the museum. This house on Mott Avenue in New London has an asymmetrical window arrangement. The Gard Arts Center is named after the owner, Walter Gard, a prominent New London and Hartford businessman. The Chapman residence in New London is a classical colonial revival home, which was not that long ago, I believe, renovated and converted to a bed and breakfast named the Inn at Ocean Avenue. You can see it's very formal and symmetrical with neoclassical details. The Momm House, M-O-M-M, in New London features an interesting approach to a second-floor balcony. It's completely integrated into the sweeping roof. Quite a modern idea. Heavy columns give this house a solid, stable feel. Here's another example of Donnelly's use of large diameter columns. There's a high level of restoration inside this New London home. Many of the original details have been preserved. The Stiles House in New London is similar to the design of the Inn at Ocean Avenue, with its use of a gambrel roof and 3 dormers and the rounded entrance portico. Here's the Mediterranean Revival style, very different than the others. This is the Mercer House in New London, with stucco walls, wide overhanging eaves, and clay roof tiles. It's asymmetrical in both general massing and window design and placement, and has an inviting entrance walk. Okay. This concludes our tour of many of Dudley St. Clair Donnelly's buildings in our area. I hope it has given you an appreciation for the man and his work. Although not a groundbreaking architect, his designs were always appropriate and sensitive to their urban or suburban surroundings. Many are quite beautiful. This is true of his houses, schools, religious buildings, and many other commercial structures. Rick thinks he would be an interesting person to meet and to engage in a pass with the old baseball. So, that's it.
Any other questions?
Are many of his drawings still around?
Yeah, yes, I donated most of the newer drawings to a structural engineer in New London because he may find those useful in renovation projects. But the Econ Linen, the original drawings back into the 20s, I gave to New London Landmarks. And they have cataloged them somewhat, and they're available. They're worth looking at, they're beautiful.
So he didn't have formal training as an architect, but during that time period, what was the formal training for an architect?
Well, the real formal for the deluxe version would have been, a lot of them studied in Europe, the Beaux-Arts tradition of classical design, and they had a much more formalized training than Donnelly, who basically got into the profession as a draftsman, and then progressed from there. But there was a lot of, I think he was a victim of a little bit of snobbery because he didn't have the formal training by his name.
Thank you.
What else?
Anyone else?
I don't know if you know, but I'm always curious about when a when an architect is engaged by a client, how much of the architect's vision is what controls the destiny of the house, and how much does the client get to contribute their own thoughts? So how many of these houses, I guess, were sort of pure Donnelly versus a combination of efforts?
There's sort of a couple of different ways to go. I think in his case, he was very eclectic, as you can see. His designs go all over the lot in terms of historical styles. But other architects who, in a lot of cases, more famous, say a Frank Lloyd Wright, he would have been hired on the strength of his past designs and the fame that they have occurred over time. So in Donnelly's case, I think he got it because he was willing to design a good building in any style within reason. And whereas somebody like Wright not only designed the house, he would design your furniture, the light fixtures, and he would require that they be put in an arrangement contractually that he agreed with. So you became sort of a slave to his, but there was a certain obvious mystique in having a house designed by somebody famous like that. Donnelly was not that kind of architect.
The plant hunting retreat at Stone Ranch in East Lyme, is that the house that has the massive fireplaces on each end?
I've never been in there, so I don't know.
I'm not sure. I believe it's owned by the state of Connecticut now.
Yes, but in the 70s, they converted it to 2 condos, and a friend of mine rented one of those condos, and they had these massive, it was called the Hunting Lodge. It's at the end of Stone Ranch Road.
Yeah.
And I remember, I'm 5'7", I could walk into the fireplace. With beautiful ornate fireplaces
Yeah.
in each condo, but at one point it was an entire, front room.
Well, I think Barb mentioned that Morton Plant and his stepson, Philip, were both the big game hunters. When we were kids, we had a zebra skin, a zebra pelt, I guess, in our basement, which we put on display for the public to come in and look at. Not that anybody ever came. We call it the Junior Museum of Natural History.
What, he gave it to you?
He gave it to my father, who was his best friend.
Philip.
Literally, Philip Ware.
Anyone else?
Obviously, a lot of work went into preparing this program, both of you together. You did a marvelous job. I'm just curious, how much time did it take for you to accumulate all this data
Well,
between the 2 of you?
Barb really did a lot of the legwork. She had a complete list that she gave me of all the local, basically all his buildings from A to Z. So I was able to work off that list and find the ones that were local, and if they were still existent, photograph them. So that was very helpful. If I had started by scratch, it would have been, probably wouldn't have ever gotten done. But
And Rick took the pictures and provided the background information about the architectural styles and how architects work, which was very helpful to me in understanding Donnelly. But we're still researching Donnelly. The day just became searchable online last year, which really makes it a lot easier to find articles and contract awards about Donnelly. There's thousands of hits in the day for him.
So is this gonna be a book or a movie?
it'd be a horror movie.
Anyone else? Well,
Unfortunately, we could only identify, I think, one building that was in actual physically mystic. So
The cemetery.
Yeah.
the cemetery, superintendent's house.
But there probably are more. And Mary Beth Baker in New London, the historian, thinks that Donnelly possibly designed the building that's in ruins that Thomas Stillman was going to build. It's now owned by the Denison Pequot Seapost
Yeah.
Nature Center.
The foundation
So
is still,
there's,
is there.
yeah,
now.
yeah. So she thinks that Donnelly was maybe the architect for
She
that.
was. He did a lot.
I think-
Side Hill,
Up on the hill.
The Pequot Seaports, in back of the farm,
Coogan
Oh,
Farm.
yeah.
Back up on the
back
hill.
of the
Yeah.
farm, which is
Yeah.
on,
Behind the Sonic here.
It's just, it's like the foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
going back there, the foundation,
really-
Oh, yeah.
amazing foundation.
Yeah.
Some house that was never carried forth. I heard that the guy was designing it for his wife, and she died. And
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
couldn't deal with it anymore, so he just sort of let it go.
That was Thomas Stillman, Mary Stillman Harkness's father. Supposedly, Thomas Stillman's wife died and he stopped the construction, but none of the dates add up for any of this because he stopped the construction before she died. It seems like Donnelly probably wasn't the architect because the construction started a couple years before Donnelly probably would have been hired to design something like that. So it's still a mystery.
Would they have had any building?
Permits way back then.
I don't
I'm
know.
sure a lot of,
That would identify a lot.
they didn't always get building permits back then, unfortunately. But I've seen that foundation. It's pretty big. It would have been quite an exorbitant and interesting house, it looks like. Never been built.
Given that his designs are so prolific along State Street in London, could he have designed the Thames Club?
No.
No?
Well, I'm not positive, but
Yeah.
I think the Thames Club was the wrong time frame.
Yeah, I think he did design, there's a long building along Washington Street that adjoins the Thames Club
Yes.
where the bowling alley is. He designed that.
Yeah.
But it's a very plain utilitarian
It's just a
addition.
house, a bowling alley.
Yeah, yeah. But I agree, I don't think he designed the original building.
Okay, one last item. Rick, thank you very much. Appreciate this.
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank
Thanks to Myra too.
you. Yeah.
Yes.